So it's time to make some magic with Brian Preston here on the Retire Sooner podcast. And you can probably already tell that we're longtime friends. Brian's one of my favorite guys in the whole industry. We have been on, I think, pretty similar paths over the years. You have a RIA, $1 billion RIA firm. You're an author. You were podcasting really long before I was. You were doing it in the when podcasts, people listen to podcasts on 8-tracks still, back in the very beginning years of podcasting. But maybe we just talk and I do, because you and I have talked about this book, and this is why I'm so excited that it's ready to launch. This has been a couple year project for you, and that was, I don't remember that being the name of the book in the beginning.
No, I do a lot of things by accident. And this book was originally titled Your Next Dollar, which is very practical. It is actually what to do with your next dollar, but that doesn't exactly get you all fired up and ready to launch into your mission to start saving and being disciplined and making all the right moves with your finances. Whereas we were doing, actually, it was me and my agent and Reby, who kind of is the head cat herder here, and we were talking about what the whole purpose of the book and the people we think that were listening. We were like, what about think about the listener who aspires to be a millionaire. It's kind of like their mission. And we were like, wait a minute. I was like, why not Millionaire Mission? Because that's actually what this book is covering, is my walk towards that from, pretty humble beginnings. And then what I've learned about money and kind of shared from working and managing money, like you talked about, because I do have a large family practice, but then also what I've seen with my own experience.
So it was Your Next Dollar, and now I wanted to say that I remember when we were talking about the book, thinking you had a pretty good title.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like an amazing title.
Yeah.
And I didn't really want to tell you that.
No.
I was like,
look.
And then when I found out this, and I know these books, they start out one way and then they take a long time to do, and then they morph and they change, and you edit and you have a better title that's more representative of the book. And when I first saw the new fully birthed book, The Millionaire Mission, I was like, that is a home run. That's a home run. So that's an A+ title, my friend.
That means the world to me, because you've been very gracious with this, but realize I'm assuming everybody in your audience knows. Like when I talk to Andrea and I think about the fact your first book sold 100,000 over. It's probably up to 200,000 at this point, but that is just so hard, because they tell you, your publisher's like, man, most books sell 5,000. So, just to hear you say that means a lot to me, Wes.
Thanks, man. And I don't know if it's where the numbers are, but it's surprising. I remember an agent telling me that once you publish a book and you put your heart and your soul into it, which I know you've done for this, and I've done this now twice. I've tried to do it a third time, and I keep hitting a wall because it's not easy to do.
Well, don't even ask me about another book. The entire team might come over here and punch me in the throat if we talk about doing a book after what we've been through to get this one out.
Yeah, it just takes a whole lot, and to get it to be great. And this is it's taken you time to do it, but that's the way it needs to be done. It takes a long time to do a great book. You can pump out a book probably in a weekend using generative AI.
Oh, and sure.
But it's it's not gonna be worth anything. So you've you have so many years of experience doing this. I don't know much about your early days.
Yeah.
Where'd you grow up? What did you do when you were like a kid? What were your first couple jobs?
I'm a South Atlanta guy, so I grew up down in McDonough, Georgia, and I was. I think I had a normal South Atlanta childhood. Money wasn't exactly laying around for my parents, but I had the great experience with going to high school with all my friends. I was a drama nerd, but I was also on the tennis team and basketball team. And my first jobs, I was working drive-through at the Hardee's, kind of doing that thing for $3.80 an hour. And then I worked all through the University of Georgia as a bus driver. I actually had my commercial driver's license. And then I was originally a finance major, but switched to accounting because I wanted to make sure I had a job. My whole motivation for doing that was just to make sure I didn't have to move back in with the parents. And it's kind of amazing, this journey from starting out in public accounting, but then public accountants started doing financial planning. And that's kind of how I got transitioned into financial planning, as I was working at a CPA.
Yeah, what year was it? So what year
came out of
did
college in 96. So, and that was, pre, Enron and all the stuff, because CPAs started realizing they could make a lot more money doing consulting than they could just doing compliance and tax returns. So, which is good for me because I got to go do financial planning as well as tax preparation. But I don't know that the industry actually benefited from that. But then I transitioned from there to that large fee-only firm in Atlanta that dealt with a lot of Home Depot executives, a lot of professional athletes. That was a great experience. But then kind of my turning point, Wes, was my dad passed away in 2000. And I just was like, man, what am I doing with my life? Because I was waking up and leaving, at 5:36 in the morning and then coming home 6 and 7 o'clock at night. And I was like, man, I'm never going to be able to go see my kids' school events or anything if I stay on this treadmill. So I took a leap and a jump and started my own firm in 2002 with really only one client. I look back and go, it was more emotional than my typical analytical self, but it started out to be a great thing. But the first 3 or 4 years, I'm not sure you would have called it a success.
When did you then move to Nashville? And tell me about the transition.
You and I met, and I think I was in that transition phase because I was trying to think about when we met, which that's a funny story to me too. It was somewhere between that 2014 to 2016 period because I had a lot of stuff going on there. But my youngest daughter is autistic, and we had this weird dilemma where I have an older daughter who was in public school, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to get special schooling for my youngest with her needs. But my wife was going to just drive around hours a day taking everybody where they need to be, and I was like, this isn't going to work. So you really almost can't do that in the city of Atlanta. It just doesn't lend itself to getting anywhere. Yeah. And there's a really good school up here in Nashville for alternative learners, and then there's a great public school system here in Williamson County. So it's been a good move, but it was hard because I had been in Georgia the first 40 years of my life, and was definitely a Georgia boy.
Yeah. So when you moved there, you really moved there for the kids and really for your daughter's school.
Yep.
And so had the practice already. You were already up and running, and then you moved to Nashville, and then things started to really, well, just like anything in the beginning, it does take a lot of time. It's not, you don't create a wealth management practice overnight. It takes a long time. When did you start to really get big momentum?
I would say, okay, here's what's so Mr. Magoo-ish for me, for anybody who's old enough to even know who that is. But I started podcasting in 2006 just because I'm a nerd, and I'd got my first iPod. It's actually in studio over here on the left for everybody who comes and does studio tours. They can see the original iPod that kind of sparked it all from 2005. But I started the first podcast in 2006. And then, Wes, you probably know how this works because you made an analogy. I remember at a conference you and I were hanging out, and I was talking about all the prospects, and you're like, it's because you filled a cup. It's kind of like when you put all the love and you really love on something, eventually the cup fills up and then starts spilling over. Well, that's
the farm sink. I always think of it as
you gave me some analogy because you and I were talking about businesses and other things. But I remember it was like 2008, so I'd been doing the podcast for 2 years just for my really own entertainment and feeling the desire to educate people because you work fee only as well, and I just always felt this air of guilt that people, unless they had $500,000 to $1 million, I couldn't help them out. And meanwhile, everybody else I felt like was getting ripped off. So I started doing this content. And then around 2008, people started reaching out going, hey, I'd love to work with you. And I was like, what? And then,
You're like, wait a minute, I'm educating on what to do. So you don't need to come to me. But invariably some people are like, and that's, by the way, our industry is that, investing doesn't necessarily have to be all that complicated, but it's so multifaceted. A and B, it's emotional. It's hard to emotionally have a long financial journey. And that's where advisory services come in, right? It's a huge part of having somebody by your side that's a coach that can be there in the tougher moments and the big planning moments that, and I think that's how great advisors earn their keep. It's not necessarily every single day, but it's at those large junctures that may add up to a lot over time.
Well, you know this, and this is something I think a lot of people who are just looking at the analytics or numbers only. I have a concierge doctor, and I don't love writing that annual big check that I write to him to do it, but I recognize that I'm at a point that the most valuable thing I need is to keep me running, and so I'm willing to pay a premium for that. I find that once you have some success when you're hiring an advisor, you want them to know who your kids are. You don't want to have to every time, when you call like these big custodians and you call their 1-800 number, you might reach a financial planner, but they're not going to know anything about you. It's kind of nice when people know you, know what your concerns are, know what your emotional hangups, know your family, and know, kind of triage you and meet you where you are and optimize that. That's really what a financial advisor does for you. And I've found my research, as we call it, well, it's not my concept. We found it in the research. Dunbar principle is that most humans can't manage more than 150 to 200 relationships. So we've had to figure out a way that we can create a service model that allows us to be all in on the relationship, but also respect the limitations of being a human and how good we are with those relationships.
So when did we first meet? I don't know how I don't think we met at a FinCon.
No, we did. Because you'll tell me how.
I thought I knew you before. I thought I knew you before we've met you at FinCon.
Well, that's just the effect I have on people. But here's how I remember it, Wes. Seriously, this will make you feel good too. So we go to FinCon, and I was trying to ask Bo which FinCon it was. It was either 2014, 15, or 16. I don't know which one, but I saw you from a distance as we were coming into the exhibit hall, and I was like, oh my God, that's Wes Moss. Me being an Atlanta boy, you're like Mr. Celebrity at the time, so I'm fanboying out, and I go up to you and introduce myself. But here's where I got a little lucky break with you, because I think you were in this stage, Wes, where you were trying to figure out, because you were having tremendous success with terrestrial and kind of traditional broadcasting. Radio. You brought your team out there to kind of see what's going on with this new media stuff. And then right while you and I were talking in that initial introduction, somebody had come up who recognized me and Bo from the podcast. And I remember it made me feel so good because I was complete fanboy on you because of all your success. And then I think that when we were off to the races and hung out a lot, it pretty much, I've been bad. I haven't been to a lot of conferences in the last 2 years, but pretty much from then on, we would hang out whenever we were at conferences.
I think that was probably San Diego, right? Maybe San Diego when we first met.
I've been all over the place, but that sounds good.
So you, though, like probably similar to me, because you grew up in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Knew of Clark Howard and probably listened to Clark. So he's kind of one of your inspirations too.
Are you kidding me? And Clark knows this because I've told him. I've been fortunate enough that I got to tell him this. And when he came up, which you and your folks helped make that happen, by the way, when Clark was on our show. I got my first iPod in 2005, but at the same time that I got that iPod around November of 2005, I was invited by one of my CPA buddies that we both went to University of Georgia as accounting majors. He was doing some work on Clark's taxes, and and I guess him and Clark had talked, and he had gotten an invitation to go watch Clark record his show, his radio show, and my buddy Brandon knew that I was a big fan, so he invited me to come sit in with it, and I was just watching Clark do that. And then I was so happy because I had a prospect folder with me because I had done a meeting in Atlanta that same day. And when Clark was taking phone calls, there was a question on savings rates, and I actually had a Jonathan Clements article.
Well, now that you mention it, yeah.
but I gave it to Clark's producer, the researcher, and then he used it on air. And I was like, oh my God, I could do this. And so I consider Clark not only to be it sounds bad when I say childhood, because I have, but Clark probably wouldn't be mad that I've been listening to him since I was much younger. But that day also, he inspired me in so many ways. So yeah, I fanboy out on Clark Howard a ton too.
Yeah. Well, he's still doing it. He's like the most efficient podcaster too. He'll go in and do like 5 podcasts and 2 radio shows, and he'll do it all in one day, and then he'll go to Europe for 2 weeks. Yeah. So he's doing it. He's doing it right.
Clark shocked me because my wife had been asking for that Amex Platinum card for a gazillion years. And I was like, we are not paying an annual fee for a credit card. And then when Clark, because I put him on the spot on our show and said, show me the credit cards you've got in your wallet. And when he whipped out that silver platinum card, I was like, oh my gosh, if Clark Howard can have it, then I guess my wife was right all along. So it's we had a great time on that episode though.
And so by the way, what card do you use now? Is that your go-to still?
That's only I use it primarily for travel and big purchases that I want to make sure that we have insurance and other benefits that we need. My go-to typically is my Fidelity Visa because it gives me 2% back on everything. And that's why when that Robinhood thing came out, it's 3%. I'm trying to figure out how I can nudge Fidelity to get me up to 3 too. Maybe they will. Maybe they will listening.
What? Let me ask you this: so you and Bo do the Money Guy show. That's the same. Did it start as Money Guys in 06, or did you ever change the name?
Well, no, it's because 2006. It
was just you, right?
Yeah, because Bo was probably. I think he was potty trained by then, but he was. He's a good bit younger than me. He's go totally. Maybe he ain't gonna watch this. He'll be all right. But yeah, Bo came on. I hired Bo in 2008, and then I started this crazy podcast. Well, it's not crazy. It was actually a great idea. Called Advisor Skills with Cheryl Holland, who you probably have met. Cheryl, she's got a great financial planning firm in Columbia, South Carolina, but nobody ever listened to that show. And so I bought a microphone for Cheryl, and when that went belly up, I was like, you know what, Bo, I've got an extra microphone. Why don't you come on air? And that was 2010, and we've been off to the races. It's kind of hard to believe that Bo's even been on air for 14 years now.
Yeah. He really started. He was pretty new as an advisor too.
Yeah, but don't let Bo's age and I don't need to call him young anymore because now if you think about it, he's mid to late 30s. So we've just been hanging out long enough that I've watched a young man turn old. And,
mid to late 30s. That's the way I feel. I remember thinking I was so young when I started in media. And now I'm wanting to be older. Now I'm older and I want to be young. You know how it is. Let's talk. We got to talk about the book, and the strategy here. You want to give the audience as much as you can about the book without giving away the entire book.
Oh no, there's so much in here. I'll just give you everything I can, and you still want
give us everything you have. Yeah. So let's start out with, first of all, how long. It's taking you a couple years to do it?
I wrote this book starting when the pandemic happened because that's actually what I call the silver lining moment is, there's all this chaos in the world. We're all working from home for a period of time. I found myself, after I walked the neighborhood a gazillion times with my wife and I was like, man, I've got to find some outlet for some of this extra time that I have. And I started writing and, man, if my high school English teacher could see it now, but it just started working. And I already had this framework. We've been working off this framework of the financial order of operations, just like math has an order of operations. If you remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally with PEMDAS. Finances are the exact same way. And there's other systems out there, but I felt like all the systems had flaws or they were, needed an update, and they just didn't reflect some of the things I've seen with my own financial life and the experience of creating wealth for my clients and myself. So I was like, I need to write this. So I wrote it, but then in addition to writing the 9 steps, hence the 9-step system, I put the origin story for everything, meaning what did I experience? So it's not only the how to, but it's also the why of why this actually works. Because I think so often, if people just understood and had the context of why these steps are in the order, but also why they work, it gives people the ability to now be educated and make better decisions on everything because they will understand it better. And this thing's road tested. I mean, we've been answering Q&A shows on the financial order of operations for 3 or 4 years now, and it's all terrain. I haven't been stumped on it yet, so this thing's working.
Well, take us through some of the I was going to say FFO, the FOO, the financial order of operations. Take us through some of those steps.
Yeah. So the first, there's other systems out there that talk about, have $1,000 or something like that. I think that actually, if you want to protect yourself from making desperate decisions, when you get an emergency, have your highest deductible covered. Write down all your insurance deductibles. Probably your healthcare is going to be the highest one. Have that covered so you don't have to make a desperate decision and run into debt and before you even get out of the starting blocks of building wealth. After that,
versus one of these more arbitrary numbers, which is like 6 months or 12 months or 18 months of cash. So you have a little bit of a why behind that first step, which I think is cool.
Because you need to have something, just a little bit of cash so you don't get into an emergency. Because, most bankruptcies are caused by like healthcare emergencies. So that's why. But if you had your health insurance premium, your highest premium covered, you're not going to have to make that decision. You'll be able to cover that. And then the second one, this one's kind of unique too, is because a lot of people immediately jump to credit cards, which I hate credit cards if you're carrying a balance. I consider that no-go zone. But even with that said, it broke my heart because I remember I had an attorney friend. She was crushing it in her 20s, but she had a little bit of student loan debt. And I remember she wasn't funding her 401k. And I was like, what are you doing? Why are you not doing your 401k? And she's like, I got to pay off all my debts first. And I was like, no. Do not do that. I was like, your employer is offering you a dollar for dollar match. That is 100% guaranteed rate of return. Get in there and get that free money. And so that's why I made sure step 2, because most employers offer you 50 cents on the dollar or dollar for dollar. That's 50 or 100% guaranteed. That's why it's got to be your second step. I know that it sucks that credit cards are charging you 20% interest, but it's hard to walk away from 50 to 100% guaranteed rate of return, and only do it up to the point that you get the free money. And then 3, now we can pay down the high interest debt. That's primarily credit cards, personal loans. It can be car loans. I can't believe how many people have talked to me recently with 11 to 15% car loans. I mean, I'm like, what? What are you doing with those type of car loans? So pay that down. And then after you get all the high interest debt, we can come back to kind of that traditional cash reserves, emergency reserves that you were talking about, Wes. That's the 3 to 6 months. But for retirees, we even like it to be 18 to 36 months, depending upon your risk profile and how you feel about your life in retirement. Then step 5 is where I think the sizzle is, though. This is where you actually start investing. That's the Roth, the health savings accounts. This is the only places that you can get that tax-free growth or start the tax-free growth. And then 6 is max out retirement options, trying to get to the goal of saving and investing 25% through your 401k, through all your different savings. 7, hyperaccumulation. This was the one people go, what the heck does that mean? Now,
I like the sound of that. Hyper
accumulation. I got it because I was really inspired by the Millionaire Next Door. The Dr. Stanley and Danko back in the mid '90s. I got that, and I remember that concept being discussed. It might have been a blog post or something, but Dr. Stanley had talked about a concept of hyperaccumulation, trying to get above 25%. But for me, in my book, what it means is understanding, now that you've been good at saving money and building the foundation, how are you actually going to use that money? That's why we have the pot of money there, is because different pots of money, meaning different tax accounts, are treated differently. You got your taxable account, your tax deferred, you got your tax free. This is the point where you need to start thinking, if I'm going to use this money, how does it need to be structured? So that's what we cover in the hyperaccumulation is now that you've got the savings down, how do we actually use this the most efficient way possible? Step 8, prepaid future expenses. I like to call this the abundance goals because this is when you basically write down, not only do I want to help the kids in college, but is this when you buy the nicer car? Is this when you go on the nicer trip? Is this when you get into residential real estate or commercial real estate? And then step 9 is let's pay off the low interest mortgage. I know some advisors say never pay off the mortgage, but I do think when you're, 50 years of age and you've already gotten through the get wealthy phase and now you're thinking about the stay wealthy phase, it's okay to de-risk by paying off mortgages and stuff. But don't do it when you're 25 years old or 32 years old, because those break my heart when I find out people are paying off 3.5%, 4% mortgage rates when they're 30 years old.
And again, that'll be one of those endless debates in the industry, right? I mean, I was just debating with an advisor today about that, and I gotta go back to my happy retiree research on as years to pay off mortgage go down, happiness levels go up because it's really a peace of mind level that goes up, and retirees that don't have a mortgage or within 5 years of paying it off are 4 times more likely to end up in that happy retiree camp.
For sure.
Dr. John Delaney from Ramsey's camp kind of has another take on it and looks at that mortgage debt and car debt as this taking away your autonomy and making it so that you are beholden to being able to pay these things off over a really slow period of time so that you're locked in, which is the opposite of autonomy. I was going to ask you about taxes. I want to ask about how you think about taxes in a minute.
Yeah.
But maybe just think about when you do financial planning, I guess I would ask this, what is your kind of core investment philosophy? If you guys are 24 months or 12 months, 24, 36 months of what I would call dry powder or cash, then a lot of that equity base that's not in that 36 months so that you have the highest level of accumulation over time, or what is your investment philosophy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing, and here's the cool thing about Millionaire Mission too, is that in the last chapter, I actually wrote a chapter of what I do with my own money. Because I felt like, hey, if somebody is proposing a system, probably the best way I could sell the system is actually to tell people what I have going on. And also, there's also I always say it's the chicken or the egg. How did this person build wealth? Was it the selling the system built the wealth, or was it the system was good and built the wealth? And I always try to encourage people to, if you look into my background and look at what I have going on, the wealth came from the saving, the investing, and being a business owner. It's not from selling a system or because podcasting and YouTube are not as lucrative as everybody thinks they are. But the key thing I would say about my investments, and I even put another thing I put in the ground rules, the first chapter on how to think about investing when you're starting out. I love index funds. I mean, if you look at my own portfolio, probably 90+% is index funds. I think it's the dirty little secret of investing. Is that even people who are selling commission products and other things, a lot of them are probably in their own time buying index funds. So that's what I do. Now, when you were talking about stocks, bonds, the allocation, because you can buy index in all those different things.
Sure.
It really, that's where kind of the triage or the secret sauce of being a financial advisor is, because you have to personalize it on how much, and I sound like a complete nerd, but because you speak this language too, the risk on versus risk off of a portfolio. And me personally, I am more risk on, but with heavy cash. I mean, I have probably more cash than, I'm way heavy on cash, because personally I'm heavy on cash. I'm heavy in my businesses, but then I'm heavy on equities. So for me personally, I am, index funds with lots of cash and some bonds and some other things like that. But then for clients, we take that more traditional, depend upon where you are on your risk profile, your goals. Do you have pensions and all the other things? If we're going to figure out if we're 60-40, 70-30, 50-50, it's all individualized at that point.
How about the power of a plan? Do you guys how often? Maybe I would say how many different versions? Because I think that there's this thought that if you do a financial plan, you do the exact same financial plan over and over and over again.
Right.
Whereas I kind of do. I would say over the years, different versions. So some end up needing to be really complex. Some are super simple, and some I literally will draw out on a pad. So how do you like doing planning?
I'll tell you, because I talk about this on the show all the time, is I obviously on our financial plan, we run all the scenarios that any client, if there's anything they've ever thought of, we will run that scenario and stress test it and figure it out. But one of the things I talk about in a lot of our content, and I do this personally, because I remember when I started my first company back in 2002, and I didn't have it this well coined yet, but I talk about putting on your 3D glasses. And what I mean by putting on your 3D glasses is that I run plans, because that's what a plan is looking to the future and what you think will happen. So I put on my 3D glasses, and the first option is the daydream. This is what you think you hope happens. This is, oh my gosh, I'm going to be rich. This is all, unicorns and rainbows. There's the down to earth plan, which is, this is what you think will happen. But it's kind of in between the dream versus, what you think will happen, the down to earth. And then the third one, this is probably the most important, because you better have the plan in case it doesn't go well, is what I call the doo-doo plan. And this is, if things go really bad, if you look at this before it goes bad, you at least have a plan of action when it does go bad, versus if you have to react to the doo-doo, it's going to be really stinky, literally. So that's why we have the 3D glasses plan.
And is that for you? Is that increasing what inflation will be, lowering your rate of return, lowering your savings? So kind of saying if everything goes wrong, this is what it looks like. We're kind of your worst case scenario
for that, because that's why I think everybody, the tendency for most people is we overestimate certain things. And I'm just saying it's nothing wrong with that, but just make sure you don't skip the homework of doing the other two plans too. So that way you have all options really covered as you're creating your plan for the future. And I think that's good for retirees as well. And we typically do that. I mean, I will, even on a successful retirement plan with a client, I'm going to try to figure out how I can break it and then and report that back to them. So I can say, hey, this is all great news, but let me make sure I give you this side of it too. So you kind of know where the boundaries or barriers are, so you don't run over those.
So what do you think, though, the obstacle is? Because if you really look at these numbers globally or a big picture in America, and maybe I think it's just the most recent numbers are 50% of America has a 401k plan. So it's only half.
Yeah.
And then you've got a lot of self-employed people that have a harder time doing any sort of saving because it's a little more manual and harder to have some sort of retirement plan if you're a small business owner. But barring that, right? Let's just say if all else were equal, what do you think the biggest obstacle is, and why is it that only 5 or 10% of people have this is $250,000, $500,000 and up saved over time?
I'll give you a stat that I'm using because I'm working on my presentation for the tour we're going to do for the book. And one of the stats is haunting me because I'm like, how is that true? How is that possibly right? 64% of Americans who are 65 and older have $100,000 or less. And when I hear that stat, I'm like, these are people who are supposed to be in the transition, and they have 100,000. That's not going to generate
two-thirds of America.
Mm-hmm. So what's the problem?
That are the boomers? 2/3 of boomers.
And it is. I know this is cliche, but it really is that there's a mindset that goes throughout the land of America right now, saying the system is stacked against you, or you can procrastinate and you'll be okay. The YOLO crowd. Tomorrow is not promised, and it breaks my heart because if you would just do something, some small incremental decision today to make your life better for the future, I promise this stuff stacks. I mean, it's not like this is the path to success is incredibly simple, but yet it has become hard or definitely not easy because people just don't have the mindset to even think they can. And I don't think the press does a great job of trumpeting successes or trumpeting how to do things well. It sells much better to present this dystopian or negative mindset because it keeps eyeballs and ears on people.
And the media has gotten even better at it, right? They get scarier and scarier and scarier as time goes on. And maybe it's just where we are in the, I don't know if it's social media or the news cycle, but every year they get a little better. It's almost like marketers have gotten better and better, right? It's like Instagram is so good. It knows that this is a belt I think Wes is going to like, or so the marketers have gotten better and smarter and better and smarter. And then the media has gotten better at upping the ante a little bit. And every time you up the ante, even though information is so readily available and there's so much more knowledge to share, and it's arguably should be easier than ever to invest, maybe it's actually harder today because of all the cross currents.
That's why I harness my inner, and I know you do the same thing. I harness my inner Clark Howard, and I think about what, or I also I talk about it all over the book too. I had a Mr. Morrow who was an economics high school teacher for me, who just said, if you could save and invest $100 a month, and just taking something that I think for most people, if you tell a 20-something, hey, if you'll just start saving $100, $200 a month, you'll have everything you could ever want. Just bringing the impossible and turning it into inevitable is something that we need more of. And that's why if you do have all these negative things, it's nice to be kind of that oasis or the respite from all the chaos that seems to be swimming around us right now.
I think that's part of it. I think that's, you're right. I think that it's an important statistic to have. And we call these scary stats here, and we are always updating our scary stats. I remember something like that, but I'm going to use that as an updated scary stat.
I did the math on this too, Wes.
Brian Preston.
Think about it, $100,000 at 65. If you went back, now, if you went to 20, it's really ridiculous. But if you just say, okay, let's give somebody a break that they wouldn't even think about their money until they're 25. I mean, because by 25, hopefully you've started a career. That means even if you just assume like a rate of return somewhere between 8 to 10%, that means people are investing less. To get to 100,000, it's less than $15 a month. And then if you take that by the current or what minimum wage that I recalled, because who knows based upon which state you're looking at, but 7.25. That means people are just basically out of every month, people are thinking about money and taking 2 hours of labor for the future out of, 160 a month. I mean, it's less than 1% or right around 1%. It's just not enough.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking about you were saying you had a minimum wage job at like $3 an hour or something.
Yeah, $3.80.
California just went to $20 for fast food. $20.
Yeah. That's a lot different than $3.80. And those early jobs, they don't pay well, but man, oh man, do I have some incredible skills from that, Wes, because if you've ever worked fast food at the counter or probably any retail job where you dealt with the general public, that's where I think being good with people came from, is because you just deal with crazies and oddballs and you have to make everybody happy. So I got a lot out of that $3.80 job.
Retail jobs. I remember selling apples.
Yeah.
I was an apple salesman.
What was the second one?
Well, I was an apple salesman.
Okay.
I don't know if that really makes any sense. I worked at an orchard. So I remember selling bushels of apples and pumpkins. And then in the fall, it would obviously you go from apples to when Halloween's coming around. I remember being in the pumpkin patch, and the orchard that I used to work with, and I still go by there when I go back to Pennsylvania. I still always drive.
On the wall?
Yeah, no, they don't. I was never apple salesman of the month, but we did have a period of time where if you guessed your pumpkin weight within $1, you got a free pumpkin.
Oh, wow. Did you run that stand?
Yeah, I did. It was there was a scale. We had a scale out in the pumpkin patch And if you're within a buck, like, or not a dollar, if you're within a pound, you would get a free pumpkin. I still remember this stat. I thought it was a great idea. So I still drive. I think it was Northbrook Orchards, and I still go by there almost every single time I go back to Pennsylvania. That was a fun retail job.
On that job, by the way, Wes. I think it sounds like you were a carnival barker, because you were actually selling guesses on what a weight of a pumpkin is for money so that's a unique skill set right there. So don't sell yourself short on that.
All right. So what is maybe over these years, either you pick your worst piece of financial advice you ever got, or the most pervasive piece of financial advice out there that's wrong, that it's blocking people, or both.
Some of our most popular content are TikTok reacts. Anybody who checks out our Money Guy channel on YouTube, you'll see the biggest views are on those TikTok reacts. So I can give you the greatest hits that we get so much feedback on is 401ks are a scam. Somebody was talking about binary options, that if you actually followed that to its end result, you would actually own all the assets in the world in like a month and a half. I mean, because it just doesn't work. And then there's the file bankruptcy as a tool. And then there's the go to cash because the whole system's rigged and it's going to collapse. So I know you asked me for one, but these are the things that I feel like folks like you and me are on the battle against every day, is trying to add.
What is there's obviously, if you look at Gallup always does this, the poll of trust. I guess it's your trust in government. And at one point, and I think you have to go back to the 60s, it was like 71% of Americans said they trusted their government, whatever. And today the numbers are in like the teens. It just keeps going down. So part of when I hear something about 401ks or retirement plans is I get this concern, or people will say, well, eventually the government's just going to take that from me because I have to do these required minimum distributions. They force me to do it. So they know that I have my IRA.
Right.
And there's this distrust about the system. Is that where that's coming from? Like when you hear 401ks are a scam, for what?
Well, usually the people.
What's the reason?
But it's not because that's more a systemic issue when you hear, because I hear that from some of my neighbors. You have a July 4th party, and half my neighbors say, "What happens if this all goes bad?" And usually there's some political, pressure on that. But I feel like the people who are telling you 401ks are a scam, they're typically trying to push you towards whole life insurance. And I don't know, for all the regulations that you and I have to do disclaimers for and protect, I don't know how our regulators haven't gone to social media to look at what's going on in the life insurance game, because there are people left and right making some pretty outlandish promises on these pretty boring products. I mean, look, whole life insurance definitely can have a place if you're wealthy enough and you have enough legacy, and there's all kind of other things, but probably 90+% of the public, that ain't the first place they need to be starting their journey to building wealth.
Yeah, the 401ks are a scam.
Yeah, I mean, you see it all over TikTok.
Yeah, I guess I've maybe seen a little bit of that. What about annuities? Do you tell me your stance on that?
Look, I think that it's once again, annuities can have a place, but the way they're currently sold, most people are being sold these variable annuities that are supposedly a replacement for investing in the stock market. Like I think about equity index annuities where they sell them off of the ratchet, where it can only make money, it can't lose money.
It can only go up.
Yeah, it can only go up. But they never tell you about talk about the participation rates or the fees. Because we had a client who came on and they showed us one of these equity index annuities, and there was really no way to make money in this thing by the way it reset the market, because what happened is that it capped how much you can make on positive years, But then on negative years, it didn't have a cap to the point. It took you to zero. I mean, you didn't lose, but it would wipe out. It had this carryover function. It was written in the weirdest way. And we basically figured out that there was no way the client would have been better because they had three options. They could do market, they could do all these adjustments, and then they just had a cash where they could have gotten 2 or 3%. They would have been better off in cash. Yeah, the guaranteed rate of return. So I don't love when they're packaged in these, I'll just say it's sleazy type of way where it tells people that they're participating in the risk of the market without any risk, because that's kind of, you can't have those two things together.
Cannot have both.
But I'm not against if somebody wants to create their own pension fund, and go doing an immediate annuity while interest rates are high. There's been some pretty sweet premiums in that marketplace that people kind of could look at and do research and figure out, are you willing to take this risk or push that risk onto the insurance company? So I'm not willing to say all annuities are bad, but it's just the majority are marketed in a way that it doesn't make me excited.
What about for your folks that are spending money over time? So you've got younger folks that are accumulating in their 40s, 50s, and then you get into your 60s and you start pulling money out.
Yeah.
Where do you come down on? I know that this is again one of these perennial debates around withdrawal rate. I know you guys have done shows about this, but just weigh in for our audience how you think about withdrawing over time.
Now it's kind of it's a nuanced answer in the fact that I always tell people I love safe withdrawal rates for what I call napkin planning, meaning that if you're somebody who's 5 to 10 years from retirement, use those. We even use them on we have a tool that on our Money Guy website that we put out there for our audience called the Know Your Number course. And we use safe withdrawal rate assumptions within that, but it's still a napkin plan, because once you get within that 5 to 10 year halo of actual retirement, you got to kind of now start stress testing the portfolio, because yes, you might have your withdrawal rate, but what about the one-off stuff, like how often you go buy cars, or what happens when if you have a mortgage, but you're trying to figure out how you balance the retirement, but paying off that mortgage now that you are going through this transition. What if you got the kids going to college, or you have wedding desires? All these one-off stuff blow up the safe withdrawal rate, because life doesn't happen in nice little consistent blocks, unfortunately. So we do much more, just like I know you do as well. We do much more nuanced, and this is why we always say this is the point where you graduate to the abundance cycle, where you need to hire a financial advisor, is because every person's financial plan is like the fingerprint or the snowflakes. They're all unique and all have different elements to them. And I like to go as deep as a client wants to go. I mean, tell me what's fun for me is when a client comes in and says, hey, run me scenarios. And this one, let's assume I'm going to get $10,000 a month. And this one, let's assume I'm going to get 12. But how about if I go to 8, but I get to retire at 55 instead of at 62? Those things are fun. And then once they realize that, they're like, what if I want to buy a camper so I can go drive across country? I'm like, let's put it in there. Let's see what happens. Yeah. I love the jigsaw puzzle of uniqueness that every financial planning client that comes to the door brings to us.
It is so true. There's enough different variables that, let's call it, there's a dozen or so really important variables, and there's enough of them. If there were 2, then it wouldn't be this way. But because there's at least a dozen, let's say, really important variables, it is almost an infinite. You have infinite planning outcomes, and that's why that you call it kind of this jigsaw. It's so correct. It's like, hey, let's do some early retirement planning. Maybe you want to stop working at 61 or 62 versus 64 or 65. Let me ask you this: a catalyst.
Yeah.
What do you see? What is something that drives people? Well, let me start by saying this. I go back to different workplace polls or Gallup polls or that I've thought about for years on workplace satisfaction. How do people like their jobs in America? Mm-hmm. Right? If you look at LinkedIn, everybody loves their job. Reality of America is only 20 or 30% of people really like their job, and maybe that's even a stretch. And then you got another third that can kind of take it or leave it, and then you've got another third that they can't stand their, they want to bring their company down.
Right.
That's how much they hate working.
Yeah.
Or they have some sort of brutal commute that just wears on them. They feel like they're on a treadmill and they're ready to get out. What is the work? And again, I think our industry has gotten smart about retirement is I want to go to something. I want to do something else as opposed to leave. But there invariably are these catalysts that kind of drive people to say, okay, I really want to do something different. I want to stop doing this job that's 40, 50, 60 hours a week. What are some of the catalysts you see that get people really thinking about, I'd love to be in a position to not have to work anymore?
Well, I was going to give you, because we had you on our show too, and you had the book Happy Retirees, and one of the key things I remember when I read the book was, kind of know what you're going to, because I think a lot of people daydream about once they have $3 million, $4 million, $5 million, but they've just put the math work in. They haven't actually done what they actually enjoy or think they're going to, and I think sadly, for a lot of people, they don't realize that when you do leave the workforce, unfortunately, a lot of those work relationships will be left behind. I mean, people, you will, the exception of the rule is you'll stay close to a few people, but a lot of times that goes away. And I think there's sometimes when people get into retirement, they're actually sad. It's not everything, unless you've done the work, and you're the expert on this even more than me, know where you want to go. And that's why it scares prospects when we start talking about that stuff. Do you actually know why you want to retire or where, what you're going to? And we always use that as a discussion point to kind of get the conversation going so that they do have successful retirement. Because what I don't want is somebody to go through that transition, because you're making usually peak earning years. You don't want to walk away from something that you're not going to be able to get back to that earning potential if you cross that threshold without doing all the homework. I don't know if that answered it perfectly, Wes, but I got a compliment in there, so it can't be all that bad.
Thank you. Brian says that I know better than anybody. Wes, you answer it.
No, but you did write a book. I mean, I did. I'm hoping that one day I'm giving an interview and somebody says, Brian, you wrote that Millionaire Mission book, so you know the steps better than anybody. So, I mean, that's kind of, I'm hoping this gets paid forward at some point.
So what is your favorite piece of advice, either in the book or something that you guys talk about on the show a lot that you think is kind of that you would leave our audience with today?
Yeah. I would, because like I said, we live in a world where everybody's telling you what you can't do. And I would encourage everybody, if I could get one big thing out of them, is to walk away from the noise and kind of just start, because our worst enemy is usually our own internal dialogue that we're having with ourselves. And I would encourage you, while you're in the shower or in those quiet moments and you're trying to figure out what is that inner voice going to be telling yourself, is you ask yourself, what small decision am I going to make today that's not only going to maximize this moment, but also give me my great, big, beautiful tomorrow? If you can just change the momentum of that inner dialogue, I think you'll be shocked at how successful things just happen. And it sounds, I'm not trying to make it sound mythical or magical, but it is just amazing if you can just change that where your mindset. Because we in our own research, we survey all of our millionaire clients. 84% classify themselves as optimists. So and by the way, America is over 50% pessimist. So that's already a counter trait to be an optimist. But if you can start training your mindset and asking yourself, what small decision will get me to my great, big, beautiful tomorrow, I think you'll be on the path. And then also, how can you make as many good habits as easy as possible and the bad habits hard? That's typically through some type of automation. Just do something. Your small decision ought to be to set something up where it's automatic so you can't screw it up.
Yeah, I love that. I think that if I think about all the complex things we have, all the tools we have today, and the generative AI that is going to change the world, I think that I do always go back to automation. If I think about some of the best decisions were to just automate it, that took a day.
Yep.
And that automation over 10 years and 15 and 20 years is like, it's incredible, right? What we can get out of it.
Slow, patient work.
Tell us as we wrap here, where By the way, your book website is amazing, where it shows all the different places. It's in Books a Million. It's in I want to see this thing at the airport. Have you gotten this in airport bookstores yet?
It remains to be seen where this is going to show up.
That's when you know you've hit it big. If you get if your book is in an airport bookstore, but where most people going to buy this?
Go out here first, because the launch is May 28th. I don't know which day this interview is going to go out, Wes, but May 28th is the official launch. But we're still encouraging everyone to pre-order the book, and we've even created some incentives to drive action. So if you go to moneyguy.com/millionaire mission, that's where you're going to see everywhere that you can buy the book. I'd also encourage you, be a financial mutant, price shop this thing. Go check on all the links, see what everybody's offering, because I'm always shocked when I see the different prices out there. But sign up, take advantage of whatever incentive we're offering for the month. And I'm telling you, if this thing, I don't care where you are on your journey, I designed this so that hopefully at the end of it, you'll feel like an abundance of I can't believe he gave all that free stuff away, or I guess the cost of the book, he gave that away. That was the goal when I wrote the book, was to basically throw the kitchen sink at it.
It's a small price to pay.
That's right.
It's a small price to pay. I hope you do tons of podcasts and get the word out on the book. We'll do our best to get this out. I don't know if Mallory can launch this thing on like May 28th. It's the exact day for you, but we'll try. We'll try.
Wes, this is a true an honor, and I love hanging out with you. You're a great hang. You're a good friend, and it just means a lot. So thank you so much for opening up your platform.